What's your "I told you this would happen" story that still makes you angry? I've studied earthquakes for the State Geological Survey for 8 years. 3 years ago, my girlfriend and I moved into a downtown high-rise, paying half my salary for 24 floors of glass and marble. One Tuesday morning, I was making coffee when vibrations traveled through my feet that had nothing to do with wind or elevators. My coffee mug showed ripples I'd seen at disaster sites, circles spreading out in a pattern that made my blood run cold. The building was settling wrong, moving sideways in a way that meant the foundation was failing. I spent 2 days measuring what would terrify any geologist. Tiny tremors shook the building every few minutes, while my equipment showed the west side dropping 3 inches faster than the east in 48 hours. Fresh cracks had spread across the parking garage's support columns since we'd signed our lease, branching out like lightning bolts frozen in concrete. The building would collapse within 2 weeks at this rate. I photographed every crack, recorded every shake, and gathered proof that would convince any rational person we were living in a death trap. I called the property management office demanding to speak with someone about evacuating immediately. The receptionist transferred me to the manager, who sounded annoyed before I even started talking. "What's this about? I have back-to-back meetings all afternoon." I explained my earthquake expertise and that we had a foundation emergency requiring immediate evacuation of all residents. She actually started laughing. "Are you seriously trying to get out of your lease this way? You signed a 2-year contract 3 weeks ago. I can't believe you're pulling this stunt already." I told her people would die if we didn't evacuate, but she cut me off mid-sentence. "Sir, this building was constructed to the highest safety standards and inspected multiple times. We've had tenants try everything to break their leases over the years. Foundation problems, mold complaints, mysterious illnesses, pest infestations that don't exist. We've literally heard every sob story imaginable." I begged her to send an inspector or review my data, but she kept talking over me. "If you're unhappy with your unit, you can go through the proper lease termination channels and pay the penalty fees like everyone else." When I tried explaining the specific measurements showing accelerated settling, she hung up on me. The next morning, I marched straight to her office on the 2nd floor, carrying my laptop and pushing past her assistant who tried to block me. I spread the earthquake data across her fancy wooden desk, knocking over her coffee mug in my rush to show her the charts proving the building would collapse. She barely glanced at the screen before leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "You know what this looks like to me? An elaborate scheme to avoid paying rent. How incredibly convenient that you're suddenly an earthquake expert right when you realize you can't afford this place." I pulled up photographs on my phone showing cracks in the garage wide enough to fit my entire hand through, cracks that were growing by the hour, but she wouldn't even look at the screen. Anyone can doctor photos these days. I'm not falling for this. I showed her my official State Geological Survey ID badge with my photograph and shiny security seal. Anyone can print fake credentials with the right printer. Besides, don't you think our construction company would know more about this building's integrity than some random tenant with a grudge? When I offered to have my supervisor at the Geological Survey call her directly, she stood up and walked to her door. "Security is already on their way up. Either pay your rent on time or begin the official lease termination process with the proper penalty payments. But stop wasting our valuable time with this elaborate nonsense." 2 security guards appeared in her doorway. "And if you keep harassing my staff with these ridiculous claims, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and slander." I grabbed my laptop and left before they could physically throw me out, her assistant smirking as I passed her desk. Desperate to save lives, my girlfriend and I packed our essentials and checked into a hotel that afternoon while I headed straight to City Hall. I spent 3 excruciating days getting bounced between departments, showing my data to anyone who would give me 5 minutes. The first 2 days were completely useless, with officials telling me to file reports that would take weeks to process. Meanwhile, the property manager left increasingly hostile voicemails threatening to destroy our credit and sue us for 2 years of rent plus legal fees. "You're in violation of your lease agreement, and I've already contacted our attorneys," she said in one message. On the 3rd day, I finally reached a building inspector who agreed to look at my data after I mentioned finding public records showing the construction company had multiple violations for using cheap materials. He went pale looking at my measurements and immediately called for an emergency inspection team. City officials arrived at the building with emergency papers, while the manager stood in the lobby screaming about government overreach and threatening to sue the city for lost money. She tried physically blocking the inspector from entering the parking garage until he showed her the emergency order. The inspector took one look at the cracks in the garage, pulled out his radio, and ordered immediate evacuation of all 300 residents. This structure could fail at any moment. We need everyone out now. I was helping an elderly couple carry bags to their car when the grinding started. The inspector screamed into his radio for everyone to get back, but people were still inside. The west wing dropped 4 feet, twisting steel beams while windows exploded across 12 floors. The property manager stood frozen on the sidewalk as her building collapsed, her face white.